She was an American soldier, proud, fearless, unbreakable. But one shot from a quiet Thai man shattered everything she thought she knew about strength. It was not just a battle of skill, it was a war between pride and truth. And what happened next would change her heart forever. A story of silence, redemption, and the power of one promise that could never be forgotten. Watch till the end, because what she discovers will stay with you long after the final shot. And hey, if this story touches your heart, if it makes you feel something real, let that feeling guide your finger. Subscribe, not for me but for every story that reminds us that even silence can speak louder than war. Red Heart. The sun burned low over the dusty range. Heat shimmered across the cracked earth, turning the air into a trembling veil. A row of steel targets stood silent in the distance, 1,000 meters away. Their gray surfaces glinted faintly beneath the late afternoon glare. Sergeant Amanda Hayes adjusted her cap, her eyes sharp, lips curved in arrogance. She had seen men like him before, quiet, small, and far too confident. The Thai man, Aran, stood calm beside her. His posture relaxed, his hands still. He looked nothing like a soldier. His shirt was plain, his boots scuffed, his face unreadable. Amanda smirked, her voice cutting through the still air. "Hit the target, and I will keep my promise," she said. Her laughter was loud, echoing off the hills. The other soldiers joined in, amused and certain of the outcome. Aran only nodded once. He stepped forward, took the rifle from the rack, and knelt. His fingers brushed the metal. Steady, deliberate, almost reverent. The world seemed to slow. Even the wind quieted, waiting. Amanda crossed her arms, impatient. Her boots scraped against the gravel. Aran inhaled deeply. The smell of gun oil filled his lungs, sharp and metallic. He exhaled, letting his heartbeat find its rhythm. One, two, three. His cheek met the stock. Through the scope, the distant target wavered in the heat haze. He did not blink. He did not tremble. The trigger moved with a whisper. Cracks split the silence. The echo rolled across the valley like thunder. Amanda's smirk faltered. She stared through her binoculars. Target, dead center. A single perfect hole. Her breath caught in her throat. Aran did not celebrate. He simply rose, eyes calm, rifle still warm in his hands. Then he looked at her. And for the first time she felt small. The laughter behind her had stopped. Every soldier watched in stunned silence. Amanda's heart pounded against her ribs. Too fast, too loud. Something in his gaze unsettled her. Calm, unyielding, ancient. It was not arrogance. It was power. And she realized, too late, that she had just wagered far more than pride. He took a single step toward her. The air seemed to grow colder. The metallic tang of gunpowder lingered between them. Her hand twitched at her side. Aran spoke softly, his voice steady as stone. "Now," he said, "a promise must be kept." Her pulse quickened. Her throat went dry. She opened her mouth to speak. And the ground beneath them trembled. The ground trembled again, a deep, slow rumble that seemed to rise from the bones of the earth. Dust lifted in pale clouds around their boots. Amanda froze, her breath shallow, her mind caught between disbelief and the echo of his words. The distant mountains loomed behind him, dark and ancient against the bleeding horizon. Aran stood unmoving, the rifle hanging loosely at his side, the barrel still faintly smoking. There was something in his stillness, something older than war, older than pride. Amanda's heart hammered painfully in her chest. She wanted to speak, to make light of her words, to laugh and dismiss it as a joke. But his eyes held her there, pinned like a butterfly under glass. They were not angry. They were not proud. They were simply knowing. The kind of gaze that stripped away armor, leaving only the truth that hid beneath the uniform. She tried to swallow, but her throat felt tight, her tongue dry. The soldiers behind her whispered now, their voices uncertain. Someone shifted uncomfortably. The laughter that had once filled the air was gone, replaced by the heavy weight of silence. The sound of a distant bird pierced the stillness, lonely and sharp. Amanda forced herself to look away. She looked toward the target again, as if needing proof of what she already knew. The hole was there, centered, flawless, undeniable. It mocked every assumption she had made, every stereotype, every arrogance that had built her confidence. She felt heat crawl up her neck, shame burning its way to her cheeks. For the first time in years, she felt small in her own world. Aran finally moved. He knelt again, carefully unloading the rifle. His movements precise, respectful. He placed it down on the table as if laying a sacred object to rest. Then he looked up at her once more, and in that gaze she saw no victory, no mockery. Only quiet disappointment. That hurt more than any insult could. War, he said softly, his accent wrapping around the word, is not about noise. Amanda blinked, unsure what he meant. He stood, brushing dust from his knees. Sometimes, he continued, power hides in silence. The words struck her deeper than she wanted to admit. The wind rose then, carrying the scent of earth and gunpowder, the whisper of something ancient moving unseen. Amanda's chest tightened. The weight of her own words came crashing back. If you win, I will have your baby. A foolish taunt meant to humiliate. Now it hung between them, heavier than any weapon. She laughed or tried to, but it came out cracked and thin. Come on, she said. It was just a joke. Aran tilted his head slightly, the corner of his mouth twitching, not in amusement, but in sadness. Promises, he said quietly, should never be born from pride. She wanted to look away but could not. The air between them seemed to hum, the evening light turning red and gold around their faces. He walked past her, slow and deliberate, every step echoing louder than her heartbeat. As he passed, she caught the faint smell of smoke and rain, strange, comforting and terrifying all at once. Her knees felt weak. Something in her chest ached, something she could not name. When she turned, he was already walking toward the edge of the range, where the land dropped into shadow. Wait, she called. He stopped but did not turn. Her voice trembled. Who taught you to shoot like that? For a long moment he said nothing. Then he spoke, his voice carried by the wind. My father, he said. He was a farmer. She frowned. A farmer. He nodded once. He taught me patience before he taught me aim. The simplicity of it hit her harder than any bullet. Amanda felt something shift inside, a small, painful crack where pride had once lived. The sun had sunk low now, painting the sky in streaks of blood and fire. The other soldiers lingered in uneasy silence, their faces unreadable. She could feel their eyes on her, waiting to see what she would do. Her throat tightened. Slowly, she walked toward the rifle still resting on the table. Her reflection glimmered faintly in its steel surface, eyes wide, uncertain, human. She picked it up, the weight familiar yet somehow different now. The weapon felt alive, pulsing faintly with memory. She aimed downrange. The target blurred through her tears. Her breath shook. He fired. The recoil slammed against her shoulder, harder than it should have. The bullet missed. Not by much, but enough to make her flinch. Enough to remind her that skill meant nothing without humility. When she lowered the gun, Aran was gone. The field was empty, save for the echo of her own breathing. But his presence lingered, like heat after lightning, like truth after a lie. Amanda stood there, the last light fading from the sky, her heart heavy, her pride shattered. Somewhere deep inside, beneath layers of training and discipline, she felt something awaken, something fragile, something real. The promise she had made, mocking, foolish, haunted her now. It was no longer about a bet. It was about honor. It was about learning that respect cannot be demanded, only earned. Her hands trembled. She whispered to the empty air, I am sorry. The wind carried her words away. No one answered. But for the first time, Amanda understood what silence could mean. It was not weakness. It was not defeat. It was power deeper than words, stronger than pride. The kind Aran had carried with him. And as the night fell, wrapping the field in darkness, she realized she would never forget the man who had taught her that lesson. Not with words, not with anger, but with a single perfect shot that broke through more than distance. It had broken through her. And somewhere, far beyond the hills, the faint sound of another rifle echoed once more. Steady, patient, true. Amanda closed her eyes. Her heart answered it. Amanda's heart echoed in the silence. It beat so loudly that she could almost hear it in the air, like the faint thump of a drum beneath the wind. The echo of that distant shot still lingered inside her chest, blending with the ache that would not fade. She turned her head toward the sound, half expecting to see him again, the quiet man with eyes that spoke louder than any bullet. But there was only the horizon. And the horizon was empty. The sun had fallen completely now, leaving only a thin line of orange bleeding into the darkening sky. The wind grew colder, brushing across her face like a ghost's breath. Her hands, still trembling, gripped the rifle tighter. It felt heavier than before. Every ounce of metal seemed to carry his calm, his patience, his truth. And with it came the weight of her own arrogance. She had mocked him. She had reduced his silence to weakness. But now she knew. There was strength in quiet men, strength that could not be seen until it shattered your pride. A chill ran through her spine as she recalled his final words. A promise must be kept. The words echoed inside her head, steady, slow, and absolute. They were not a threat. They were not even a demand. They were a truth, one she had spoken into existence with her own arrogance. Amanda looked at her reflection again in the rifle's metal surface. Her eyes were red now, her face streaked with dust and sweat, her expression no longer proud but lost. The woman staring back was not a soldier. She was a child pretending to be strong. A tear slipped down her cheek. It was hot, stinging, filled with the taste of regret. The world around her seemed to blur, as if even the air pitied her. She turned slowly, her boots crunching against the gravel. The other soldiers had gone. Only their footprints remained, lines in the dust leading away into darkness. She was alone, completely, utterly alone. And yet she could feel him. Aran's presence still lingered in the air like smoke, invisible but impossible to ignore. She walked toward the edge of the range where he had vanished. Her steps grew slower with each yard. The light had faded to blue, the kind of blue that hides things rather than reveals them. The world felt larger, emptier. Each gust of wind carried whispers, or maybe it was her imagination, fragments of sound that seemed to murmur her name. Her pulse quickened. Fear and guilt twisted together inside her chest. When she reached the edge of the slope, she stopped. Below her, the land stretched endlessly, a sea of darkness broken only by silver ripples of moonlight on distant puddles. Somewhere down there she thought he was walking. But where? Why had he left without a word? Why did it feel like something sacred had passed between them, and she had broken it? Amanda's knees gave way. She sank to the ground, pressing her palms against the cold dirt. The smell of the earth filled her senses. Raw, alive, ancient. It reminded her of something she had forgotten long ago. Humility. The world did not bend for pride. It only listened to truth. She whispered into the dark, her voice trembling. Aran, I did not mean it. The night swallowed her words whole. No answer came. She closed her eyes, and in that stillness, she saw it again, the moment of the shot. His calm breathing. His steady hands. The quiet focus in his eyes. And beneath it all, a deep sadness, as if he had already known she would not understand. When she opened her eyes, something shimmered in the distance. A faint glimmer like light reflecting off metal. She rose to her feet, her heart thundering again. She took a few cautious steps forward. The air grew colder, the wind sharper. The glimmer remained, unmoving, constant, calling her closer. It was his rifle. He had left it behind. Amanda knelt beside it, fingers trembling as she touched the weapon. It was warm. Too warm. as if he had just been there. Her breath caught. She looked around, scanning the shadows, searching for movement. But there was nothing, only silence stretching out to infinity. Still she felt watched, not in fear but in judgment. Her chest tightened. She lifted the rifle carefully and held it close, the metal pressing cold against her skin. Her reflection looked back at her again in the scope, distorted, blurred, half-human. A gust of wind tore through the field, carrying with it the scent of rain. She looked up at the sky, heavy clouds rolling in, swallowing the moonlight. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Amanda's throat tightened. She whispered again, barely audible, "I am sorry." The wind carried it away once more, but this time it brought something back. Voice. Barely there, but she heard it. Silence is where truth lives. Her eyes widened. Her heart stopped for a beat. It was his voice. She spun around, nothing. The rain began to fall, slow at first, then harder, soaking through her uniform. Each drop hit the rifle with a soft metallic tap, like tears on steel. Amanda sank to her knees again, clutching the weapon. The sound of rain filled her ears. Endless, cleansing, relentless. She closed her eyes and let it wash over her. In that moment, something inside her broke completely. The mask, the pride, the armor she had worn for years. All of it melted away in the storm. What remained was fragile and painfully human. And in that vulnerability, she felt something she had not felt in years, peace. 'Cause she understood now. Aran had not wanted to win. He had wanted to teach. And his lesson had reached her. Not through words, not through glory, but through the quiet echo of truth. She pressed her forehead against the cold steel of his rifle and wept. The rain mingled with her tears, falling into the earth below. And somewhere, far away, under the same storm, Aran looked up at the sky, eyes calm, heart heavy, and whispered a prayer for the woman who had finally learned to listen. The rain fell harder now, turning the dry field into a sea of mud and memory. Amanda stayed on her knees, her uniform soaked, her hair plastered to her face, her fingers gripping the rifle as if it were the last thing keeping her from disappearing. Each drop stung her skin, cold, relentless, alive. Thunder rolled again, deep and distant, echoing through the valley like the heartbeat of something greater than both of them. She lifted her head slowly, her breath trembling, her eyes red. Through the curtain of rain, she could barely see the far hills where Aran had vanished. But she could feel him, like a pulse in the air, steady, quiet, eternal. The silence between thunderclaps grew heavy. And in that silence, she heard the faint rhythm of her own breath, mingling with the storm. It was no longer a battlefield. It was a confession. Her lips parted and words slipped out like prayers. "I was wrong," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "I was blind." The storm did not answer, but the lightning that flashed across the clouds felt almost like a reply. Fierce, cleansing, merciful. She pressed the rifle to her chest and stood, her boots sinking deep into the wet soil. Each step she took made a hollow sound, as if the earth itself was listening. She moved toward the dark horizon, where the mountains met the storm. Her vision blurred with tears and rain, but she did not stop. Every step was heavy, but her heart felt strangely lighter, as if with each movement she was shedding layers of herself. Layers of pride. Layers of arrogance. Layers of the woman who had once laughed at a quiet man. Her breath grew ragged as she reached the edge of the range, where the grass grew wild and tall. Lightning lit the sky again, and for a split second she saw it. A figure standing in the rain. Watching. Aran. Her breath caught. Her pulse thundered louder than the storm. She blinked and he was gone. But the imprint of his gaze burned in her mind. Calm, patient, eternal. Amanda stumbled forward, half running now, her boots slipping in the mud, her fingers clutching the rifle so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "Aran!" she called out, her voice breaking. The wind tore her words apart, scattering them across the valley. "Please." No answer. Only rain, falling harder, colder. She fell to her knees again, gasping, crying without sound. Her tears were lost in the storm, indistinguishable from the rain that soaked the earth. She bowed her head, pressing her palms into the mud. For a moment, she wished she could sink into it, vanish, disappear, become nothing. But then she felt it again. Warmth. Faint but real. It spread from the rifle in her hands, pulsing like a heartbeat. She lifted it slowly, staring at it through the rain. Something shimmered on its metal surface. A faint engraving she had not noticed before. Name. Not his. A woman's. Lolita. The letters were worn, carved by hand, almost erased by time. Her heart clenched. She whispered the name softly, reverently. "Who are you?" Her voice trembled as she traced the letters with her thumb. Lightning split the sky again, illuminating everything in harsh white light. The mountains, the field, her face, and for a single heartbeat, his silhouette, standing behind her. Close enough that she could almost feel his breath. Amanda froze. Her lungs locked. Her fingers tightened around the rifle. Slowly she turned. But there was nothing there. Only rain whispering secrets. Her heart pounded painfully. She sank down again, pressing the rifle against her chest. And suddenly she understood. The name was not a stranger's. It was his mother. The farmer's wife who had raised him, who had taught him patience. The woman who had probably carved this name into the rifle he now carried with reverence. Amanda's vision blurred with tears again. This was not just a weapon. It was memory. It was family. It was a piece of his soul. And he had left it with her. Not as punishment, as trust. Her breath caught, and she began to cry again. Softly at first, then harder, the sound raw and unguarded. The storm roared around her, but she no longer cared. Her heart ached with something deeper than regret, something like gratitude twisted with sorrow, because she realized the truth. He had forgiven her before she even knew she needed forgiveness. He had seen the pride in her eyes and still chosen compassion. He had left her with a piece of himself, so that she would never forget. The rain began to soften now, the thunder fading into distant echoes. Amanda lifted her head, her face streaked with tears and mud, her eyes searching the sky. And in that fragile quiet after the storm she whispered, "Thank you." The clouds broke apart, revealing a thin silver moon. Its light touched the rifle, glinting off the name carved into it, Lolita. Amanda smiled through her tears, broken but alive. She looked toward the horizon once more. She thought she saw him then, far away, walking toward the light that lingered behind the storm. Each step calm, certain, fading into the mist. Her heart tightened, but she did not call out this time. She simply watched, her hand resting over her chest where the rifle's warmth still lingered. When he finally vanished into the distance, she whispered one last time, "Wherever you go, may peace walk with you." The wind rose gently, brushing her face, and for a brief, impossible moment, it felt like a hand, warm, forgiving, human. She closed her eyes and let it stay there, over her heart, until the dawn began to rise. The first light touched her skin, soft and golden, painting the wet ground in silver. Amanda stood slowly, her uniform heavy, her spirit lighter than it had ever been. She looked down at the rifle, his gift, his lesson, his memory, and held it close. Then she whispered the words that had once wounded her but now set her free. "Silence is where truth lives." And as the sun climbed over the hills, bathing the world in light, Amanda walked forward. No longer the woman she had been, but someone new, someone real, someone finally awake. The morning came softly, yet it felt wrong. The sky should have been calm, but instead, it pulsed with a quiet tension that clung to Amanda's skin. The storm had passed, yet the air carried a strange heaviness, as if the earth itself had not yet exhaled. The field was no longer a battlefield, nor a place of arrogance and laughter. It had become sacred ground. Mud clung to her boots as she walked, slow, deliberate, careful. Every step left a deep print that filled with water, glimmering like small mirrors of the sky. The rifle hung at her side, its weight both burden and comfort. The name carved into it, Lolita, seemed to whisper in her mind over and over, a rhythm that matched her heart. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she had to follow the pull inside her chest, the invisible thread that still connected her to him. The one who had taught her that silence was not weakness. The one who had shown her what strength truly looked like. The world around her seemed different now. Colors were softer, sounds sharper. Even the air tasted cleaner, touched by the storm's passing. And yet, beneath all that beauty, she felt something deeper stirring, something she could not name. It was as if the land itself remembered him. Every blade of grass, every ripple in the puddles, every whisper of the wind. It all spoke of Aran, of the quiet man who had carried truth in his stillness. Amanda's chest tightened as she reached the edge of the valley. There, half buried in mud and stone, stood a small wooden marker, crooked, weathered, old. She knelt beside it. The letters were faded, but she could still make them out. It was written in Thai, carved by hand. She traced the grooves with her fingers, her throat tightening. The translation came slowly, painfully, from memory. To those who live with pride, may humility find them before death does. Her breath caught. She looked up, eyes wide, scanning the empty valley. The wind howled once, low and long, like a sigh from something unseen. Her heart began to race. Was this where he had been going? Was this where his story had begun, or where it had ended? She gripped the rifle tighter, her knuckles white. Lightning had burned the shape of that message into her mind. The truth she had mocked had been waiting for her long before she ever arrived. Her legs trembled as she stood again, wiping rain from her eyes. She felt small beneath the vast, endless sky, a single human in the shadow of something infinite. And for the first time she did not resist that feeling. She embraced it. A faint sound broke the stillness, the soft crunch of gravel behind her. Her breath froze. She turned slowly. There, at the top of the slope, stood a figure. Butching. The wind tore at his clothes, but his posture did not move. Amanda's heart lurched. Could not be. Aran, she whispered. The name trembled out of her like a secret she had held too long. The figure did not answer. But as the clouds parted, light spilled across the field, and she saw his face. Changed. Eyes deep as the horizon. He looked exactly as he had that day, except now there was something different in his gaze. Something ancient. Something otherworldly. Amanda took a step forward, her hands shaking. She wanted to speak, to ask 1,000 questions. How was he here? Why had he left her that rifle? What did he mean by silence? But the words never left her mouth. Because in that moment she understood, he was not really there. Not in body. Not anymore. He was memory, shaped by her guilt and her longing. He was what remained when a lesson takes root in the soul. And yet, he was real enough to look back. Their eyes met. She felt everything collapse inside her. Fear, awe, sorrow, forgiveness, all crashing together into something raw and sacred. He lifted his hand slowly, pointing toward the valley behind her. His voice was faint, carried by the wind. Peace lives there. Amanda turned. In the distance, far beyond the valley, she saw a small village. Fields of green. Smoke curling from huts. Children running through puddles left by the storm. Life. Simple, quiet, beautiful. When she looked back toward the hill, he was gone. Only the wind remained. It brushed her cheek like a farewell. She stood there for a long time, the morning light warming her skin, the words echoing in her mind. Peace lives there. She felt the pull again, not the restless drive of pride, but the quiet calling of redemption. She started walking, down through the valley, toward the village. Every step felt like shedding another piece of who she had been. The closer she came, the more the sounds of life reached her. Laughter, barking dogs, the rhythm of tools striking soil. And then she saw it. A small house at the edge of the fields. Wooden. Humble. A patch of flowers growing wild beside the door. And hanging on the porch, a small wooden sign. The letters were faint, but her heart stopped as she read them. Lolita's rest. Her breath trembled. Her knees nearly gave way. She approached the door, her pulse pounding in her ears. Inside, she could hear a woman humming softly. Until Amanda's throat tightened. She knocked once, twice. The humming stopped. The door creaked open. An elderly woman stood there, her eyes kind but cautious. Her face was lined with years, yet her gaze carried the same calm strength Amanda had seen in Aran. "Can I help you, child?" the woman asked. Amanda could not speak. She held out the rifle instead, the name Lolita gleaming faintly in the light. The woman's eyes widened. Her hand rose to her lips. "That belonged to my son," she whispered. Amanda felt her knees weaken. Her voice broke as she spoke. "He wanted you to have it back." Tears welled in the woman's eyes, spilling down her cheeks. She reached out, her hand trembling as it brushed the metal. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Only the sound of birds and wind filled the space between them. And then the woman smiled, soft, sorrowful, full of peace. "You have carried his lesson," she said. Amanda nodded, tears streaming freely now. "He carried mine." The old woman reached out and pulled her into an embrace. Amanda froze for a moment, then melted into it. Her heart breaking and healing all at once. The smell of earth, smoke, and jasmine filled her senses. Felt like forgiveness. Felt like home. And in that quiet moment, under the rising sun, Amanda finally understood what Aran had meant all along. Peace was not a place. It was a person. It was the truth we carry when we stop running from ourselves. And for the first time her heart was silent and free. The embrace lingered. It was fragile, trembling, full of everything words could not hold. Grief, gratitude, the heavy silence of two hearts trying to heal. When the old woman finally released her, Amanda stepped back, her eyes glistening. The small home smelled of rice, wood smoke, and rain-soaked earth. Somewhere inside, a kettle whistled softly, steady and familiar, like the sound of life moving on. Lolita, for it could only be her, turned slowly and gestured for Amanda to come in. The room was simple. A wooden table, a few chairs, faded pictures lining the wall. But it was the one on the far corner that caught Amanda's breath. A photograph, weathered and yellowed by time. It was him, Aran, standing beside a younger version of Lolita, holding a rifle. The same rifle Amanda now carried. He was smiling. Not the quiet, unreadable look she had seen on the range. A real smile, soft, kind, free of burden. Amanda's throat tightened as she walked closer, her fingers brushing the frame. "He looked happy," she whispered. Lolita nodded, her eyes distant. "He was. Before the war took that smile." Amanda turned to her slowly. "He was a soldier." The old woman smiled sadly. "He tried not to be. But the world has a way of forcing even gentle hands to carry guns." Amanda lowered her gaze. She understood that too well. "How did he?" her voice faltered. "How did he die?" For a long time the woman said nothing. The kettle whistled again, louder now. She turned away, poured the tea, and answered quietly. "He did not die in battle. He died saving a child who wandered into the range one morning. No one saw him hesitate. He ran without thinking. That was Aran. Always silent, always sure." Amanda's knees weakened. Her breath caught in her chest. She felt her vision blur as tears welled. Her fingers tightened around the rifle strap until it bit into her skin. "He never told anyone." "He would not," Lolita said. "He did not believe in stories told for praise. He believed truth lives best in silence." The words struck deep, the same words he had once spoken to her. Amanda sank into the nearest chair, her heart pounding. The sound of rain began again outside, gentle this time, as if even the sky mourned softly. Lolita set a cup of tea before her. It steamed faintly, filling the air with jasmine and warmth. Amanda lifted it slowly, her hands trembling, her reflection rippling in the golden surface. She could see Aran's face there, clear as day. For a moment, she felt as though he were sitting across from her, silent, watching. "Do you hate me?" she whispered, though she was not sure to whom she spoke, to the mother, to him, or to the universe itself. Lolita looked at her gently. "My child, hatred dies where understanding begins. You did not come here to be forgiven. You came here to forgive yourself." Amanda stared down at the tea, her lips trembling. The words cut her open and healed her all at once. Tears slid down her face, hot and unrestrained. "I mocked him," she said softly. "I laughed at him. I challenged him to prove himself. And he did. He did more than I ever could. And I never got to say I was sorry." The old woman reached across the table and took her hand. "Then say it now," she said. Amanda closed her eyes, her chest rising and falling. "I am sorry, Aran," she whispered, her voice breaking. "For my pride. For my blindness. For not seeing you for who you were." Outside, a sudden gust of wind swept through the fields. The door creaked open slightly. The curtains shifted, carrying the scent of rain and jasmine through the air. And for an instant, Amanda felt warmth brush against her cheek. Not from the wind, but from something deeper. It was gentle, familiar, forgiving. She opened her eyes, and the room seemed to glow faintly in the morning light. Lolita smiled softly, her own eyes glistening. "He heard you," she said. Amanda nodded, unable to speak. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of peace, of memory, of a presence that lingered beyond life and death. When the tea cooled, Lolita stood and walked to a small chest by the window. She opened it carefully, her hands trembling slightly, and returned with a folded piece of fabric. She placed it in Amanda's hands. It was a scarf, faded green, embroidered with small white flowers. "He wore this when he left home," Lolita said. "He wanted to give it to someone who needed it more than he did." Amanda's breath hitched. She ran her fingers across the fabric. It was soft, delicate, still carrying the faint scent of smoke and rain. "I cannot take this." Lolita shook her head. "It is not mine anymore. He chose to leave it behind. Perhaps he knew you would come." Amanda pressed the scarf to her heart, tears streaming freely. She whispered, barely audible, "Thank you." The old woman placed a hand on her shoulder. "When you wear it," she said gently, "remember not the shot that one but the silence that followed. That was his gift." Amanda nodded slowly, her voice caught in her throat. The moment stretched between them, long and quiet, until the sound of a rooster crowing outside broke it gently. The world was waking again. Life continued as it always did. Amanda rose, wiping her tears. She bowed her head deeply to Lolita. "May I come again?" she asked softly. Lolita smiled. "The door will always be open. But remember, peace does not live here. It lives in you now." Amanda hesitated, then stepped forward and embraced her one last time. When she finally walked away from the house, the sun was breaking through the clouds. The fields shimmered under the new light, gold and alive. She walked barefoot through the wet grass, the scarf wrapped around her neck, the rifle strapped to her back. Every step forward felt lighter, freer. As she reached the road leading out of the village, she turned once more. The house stood quietly, smoke rising from its chimney like a final prayer. She smiled through her tears. And in the wind that brushed past her, she heard it. His voice, calm, certain, eternal. "Peace lives there." Amanda closed her eyes and whispered back, "Yes, it does." Then she walked on, toward the horizon, toward forgiveness, toward the endless sky that waited to receive her newfound truth. The sun dipped low once again, painting the sky in colors too beautiful for war and too tragic for peace, a crimson gold that bled across the horizon like the memory of fire. Amanda stood alone at the edge of the valley. The scarf around her neck fluttered softly in the evening wind, its green threads glowing faintly under the dying light. In her hands she held the rifle, the same one that had once divided pride from truth, arrogance from humility. But now it felt different. It was no longer a weapon. It was a promise. A story that would live beyond both of them. The air was quiet. Only the hum of insects and the distant whisper of the wind filled the silence. Amanda closed her eyes, her heartbeat slow, steady. She could still hear him, Aran's calm voice echoing in her mind, as real as the first day she met him. Power hides in silence. Promises must be kept. Peace lives there. Every word had changed her. Every moment had carved something new into her soul. She turned her gaze toward the sky, endless, eternal, and whispered softly, "You were right." Her voice trembled, but there was peace in it. True strength is not in pulling the trigger. It is in knowing when not to. A faint wind brushed her cheek, as if in answer. It carried with it the scent of rain, soil, and smoke, the smell of memory. Amanda smiled faintly. "Goodbye, Aran," she whispered. "You taught me more than war ever could." For a moment the clouds above shifted and the sunlight broke through, a single beam landing on her face. It was warm, gentle, forgiving. Her eyes glistened as she raised the rifle high, pointing it toward the sky, not in defiance but in tribute. A shot rang out, not of battle but of remembrance. The sound echoed through the valley, across the hills, into the fading light. Somewhere it would reach him. Somewhere he would hear it. And then she lowered the rifle, her heart calm, her eyes lifted toward the fading sun. The scarf fluttered once more, soft, weightless, alive. It caught the wind and flew free from her shoulders, drifting upward higher and higher, until it vanished into the gold of the setting sky. Amanda smiled through her tears. This was how his story, their story, would live on. Not in medals, not in victories, but in hearts that remembered. And as the last light faded, she turned toward the camera, toward you. Her voice, quiet but full of fire, spoke straight through the silence. If you have ever believed that silence has no power, think again. Because sometimes the loudest lessons are whispered. Sometimes peace begins not with pride, but with understanding. She paused, her eyes soft, her smile touched with grief and hope. If this story reached your heart, even for a moment, then remember it. Carry it forward. And before you leave, the music swelled, slow, emotional, rising like dawn after the longest night. Hit that subscribe button. Not for me, but for every story like this. Every soul that fought not with hate, but with truth. Every quiet hero the world forgot. She looked into the distance one last time. The valley shimmered in twilight. A whisper of wind passed through the tall grass, gentle, eternal, like the voice of the man who had taught her to listen. Amanda's final words came soft and trembling. For Aran. For silence. For peace. The screen faded slowly to black. A single sentence lingered in white letters against the dark. True strength needs no noise. Then, below it, glowing faintly like a heartbeat. Subscribe for more stories that live beyond the sound.